Manila is an assortment of different historical and cultural events from the Spanish colonization up to present day. Walking around the streets of Manila, we are experiencing an emulsion of cultural diversity from the past decades.
Burnham was actually one of the very people who wanted to cherish the uniqueness of our country. Being a tropical archipelago, it gave us this unique opportunity to innovate and provide planning solutions. He wanted to create these beautiful green belts and frame monumental landmarks that allow a mere passerby to have this focal experience of beauty. But the value of these grand monuments have somewhat faded over time. These larger commercial spaces have started to rival historical landmarks, to inevitably be undermined by tall condos and wide shopping malls that are inconsiderably placed, which neglects the historical relevance of these buildings.
Burnham also wanted these historical monuments to become a part of our everyday lives. Even within a fairly distant radius, the vistas he envisioned to create could have been seen from afar while strolling on the streets of Manila. And within these streets, he wanted to build upon distance and close proximity from everyday needs. In Burnham's ideas for planning, we understood how there's a separation of the experience and what you see, looking at a perspective from what you feel while walking through the plans of the city. Through these separate ideas, they are woven together into a scenic experience of a beautiful city.
Walking around present-day Manila is already a unique experience on its own. However, not the experience we hope to be. With these hopes for the future, we have slowly molded this idea built from practicality and contemporary car-centric concepts, which slowly neglected our monuments to decompose. The distorted vision of progress altered the image put to plan by Burnham, influenced by ephemeral solutions that have taken a toll on this once hopeful part of the city.
Upon approaching this project of replanning a part of Manila while keeping in mind the objectives of Burnham, we decided to look at the community from inside out. We took notice of the culture embedded into the people and their respective vicinity. Burnham once spoke of doing things big in a way that idealized the need for looking at things from a larger perspective. In contrast, we decided to start our city planning by creating different realms. Creating these realms, we developed a thoughtful arrangement, putting them together, creating a big plan, having them interact with one another through a seamless transition of commercial spaces and pedestrian activity. Through this approach, we then also applied it to the framing of the landmarks, dividing of intimate public spaces, and in whole creating an active vernacular of the city planning. The need for diversity and inclusion was one of the integral ideas we wanted to implement in the city. The acceptance of a diverse community with different age groups, lifestyles, pastimes, or even religious affiliation was important to the planning of the city. There is often a lack of interaction amongst people with different backgrounds. By allocating spaces for specific athletic activities, commerce, and mere open public areas, social interaction is hoped to be inspired and even encouraged.
The city develops a synthesis of various interconnected programs that reevaluates the urban planning process in a mixed-use context. As the city is built from realms, we tried to conceive an intermingling connection between office and residential. We reassessed circulation and the need for directness of our paths, while instilling the introduction of micropaths that provides the curiosity and the feeling of ownership to their own intimate spaces.
Upon entering this part of the city through the Jones Bridge, we already get to see a glimpse of various landmarks that make this particular area of Manila so special. There's a collection of neoclassical buildings, the Manila Post Office, Metropolitan Theater, and the City Hall, all of which are truly important to Philippine history. Because of this, we did want to ensure that the flow around the city, along with the allocation of land, complemented these monumental sites. The Manila Post Office is a grand establishment that was constructed decades ago, back in 1920s. Looking at the post office alone, we notice the lack of appreciation towards the architecture, something that could be enjoyed and given valuable recognition to by providing a variety of views. Realizing how the building is at a location that is surrounded by a lot of vehicular activity, we wanted to provide a program in front of the site that would allow people to better appreciate the post office, whether they are inside a car or not.
The Pinavia, or the roads in front of the post office, was redesigned not to only have a more legible flow for vehicles, but also provide the space in the center of the overpass that welcomes a new program. We introduced an elevated patch of land that aims to invite pedestrians to gather and experience an interesting view of the post office from different elevations. Realizing how isolated the post office can be, providing an interesting market culture in the middle of the Pinavia and replanning the area around the Bonifacio Monument at the front would gather more eyes to appreciate the architecture of the Manila Post Office.
Now moving on to the Manila Metropolitan Theater right across the Pinavia, yet another historical landmark neglected by the lack of pedestrian activity and opportunity for publics to interact with the structure. With this space, we wanted to approach the planning to be somewhat nostalgic and appreciate Philippine arts. By redesigning the back of the Metropolitan Theater into an open garden, we intended the landscaping to pay tribute to the paintings of Juan Arellano, traditional, intimate, and grand. The maze-like plan would allow people to enjoy a stroll around the garden filled with diverse native fauna.
As our introduction to the city, the bridge is the primary linkage of our reprogrammed open space for public recreation, sport, and events, right next to the formidable city walls of Intramuros. The bridge is seamless from high up, providing great views and grounds itself discreetly amongst the protruding figures of our city. This part of the city explores what you could do in such a large open space, as we sense how the simple effort of changing its program can do so much for the people.
Walking from the Forest Park or Intramuros through this green bridge, we find ourselves at the front of Manila City Hall, currently housing the office of the mayor along with other offices and the chambers of the Manila City Council. It has become a congested building of high levels of foot traffic. It then became an opportunity for us to open up this establishment and distribute the offices of the Manila City Hall to the surrounding plaza. The GSIS building is a Philippine landmark just waiting to be given purpose. It is unused and unappreciated. Looking at this orientation from the current City Hall building, we realized how grand the GSIS building could be if it had just been given a stage. The plaza is a triangular space that would serve as an open food court for the public to lounge. This open space is a linkage, a common area that makes the government institutions surrounding it feel like a campus. With this new plan, the government buildings in Manila become integrated into the open, inclusive culture.
Moving through our office spaces, we found the opportunity to develop spaces vernacular to our culture. These office spaces provided the necessary importance of our city, but it also conditions the space as a second home that provides opportunities for pop-up marketplaces that brings the culture of bringing home pasulubong to their children to its community. The offices were designed in two ways. The elevated offices provided a specific interiority that binds various office spaces together, possibly giving necessary space for parking below, while the offices in the ground level were designed specifically to communicate with its neighboring blocks.
As we go deeper into the interiors of our city, we find ourselves in the synthesis of office and residential. The offices and commercial buildings reside on the outer ring, while we go into the elevated, more private region. We find these obscure residential buildings that open various intimate pathways that give its own sense of belonging. This idea spans all around, as the intention was to bring a variety of architectural identity all throughout the space.
Now, having office spaces and residential buildings next to each other creates this close-knit community that really provides this necessary privacy. But despite all of that, in the heart of it all, opens this wide space of recreation and sport. The idea was to develop this stadium-like interaction amongst the homeowners and the children strolling, playing, mirroring plazas of the Renaissance, and highlighting proximity of communication.
Towards the end of the day, we find a community that is often, if not constantly, disregarded and seen negatively. Skaters in this area of Manila had no place. They had no place to practice their skills or merely enjoy this recreational sport alone. Our undertakings for inclusion enabled us to find the need to create belonging for these people and develop a special kind of skate park that weaves a larger demographic to involve themselves indirectly to the sport. This now becomes a learning experience, an opportunity to normalize an often overlooked sport. The skate park became a combination of volcanoes and bowls, patches of grass, and a commercial strip to enjoy just the same.
To the second half of the city, we knew that developing the Islamic culture in the area was one of the most important parts of the project. We developed this realm to become self-sufficient, yet connected to the entire city. We made use of precedents coming from various Islamic countries to develop a space that provides a sense of identity and most of all values the religion. In improving the community formed around the existing mosque, we began developing ideas on how to integrate residential, market, and religious spaces. Observing the communities currently living in the area, we noticed how important local businesses were to them and how this was an opportunity to uplift these small areas by providing them a place that gives them purpose and a sense of belonging. But in order to achieve this goal, we first thought that we have to encourage foot traffic instead of vehicles and create pockets between residential homes for an active, less divided community.
Within the community, you would be able to find a mosque, hidden yet elevated, separate from the rest of the surrounding structures. By positioning the structure this way, we wanted to create a solemn experience when walking towards that mosque and feel uplifted and a part of the community in this urban mosque area. At the end of the day, we understood how important vistas are to the community to form intimate interactions with their surroundings. As we tried to link the two halves of the city separated by the river, it was important for us to develop anchor points linked by a three-point pedestrian bridge. Moreover, the addition of a new museum, library, and theater specifically for the contemporary arts involves the people to an ever-changing culture promoting a new direction of accessible arts.
As creating views was an essential part of the city, providing height limits to the structures was another aspect of planning we thought needed to be done. By implementing a descending elevation of buildings to create openings toward vistas, and a mixture of variety of heights in between, the city creates an organized and organic undulating skyline.
The essence of our kinesthetic city was to really highlight the idea of an active and interactive implementation of public spaces. We try as much as possible to combine different typologies, encouraging interaction and providing a sense of belonging amongst people.
In addition to this, the market culture we created was an important part of our local community. The efforts to always give affordable or completely free spaces for the local market was needed, as we reflect to the current conditions of our country and how it is important for us to include these people who are often neglected. The development of our areas becomes an invitation to all to develop their cities together with the neglected and to create new cultures with them. This view of planning would not only be beneficial but influential.
Through our developed city, we found that planning at a human scale has actually allowed us to develop more empathetic spaces, keeping in mind the stakeholders of our community. With our intuition to realize the space more intimately, we understood how big plans can be created through smaller plans of big ideas.